The flashing red and blue lights painted the cracked sidewalk in jolting rhythm, a warning more than an announcement. "Hands where I can see them!" The officer's bark sliced through the humid Atlanta evening. 17-year-old Maya Carter froze mid-step, a brown paper bag slipping from her trembling fingers. The sandwiches she'd made for her little brother spilled onto the pavement, the bread soaking up dirty rainwater pooling near the curb. She wasn't speeding. She wasn't fighting. She was just walking home from her part-time library job, still in her volunteer shirt that read, "Read to Lead." "Don't move," Officer Trent barked again, his hand already hovering over his holster. His partner, Officer Riley, circled behind her. Maya's voice shook. "Sir, I didn't do anything." "Quiet," Trent snapped, cutting her off. "We got a call about a shoplifter matching your description. Backpack, dark hoodie, female, African American. That sound familiar?" She blinked in disbelief. "I just came from the library." "Uh-huh, and I'm the Queen of England. Hands behind your head." A small crowd began to form near the sidewalk cafe. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "She's just a kid." Maya's knees wobbled as rough hands pushed her down onto the wet pavement. Her cheek hit the cold concrete with a thud that sent pain shooting through her jaw. She tasted metal, blood. Officer Trent laughed. "Next time you want to play gangster, sweetheart, maybe don't do it in front of security cameras." He pressed his knee against her shoulder, unnecessary, cruel, and humiliating. "Please," she whispered, "you're hurting me." "Hurting you?" he scoffed. "You people always play victim." The words "you people" burned through her like acid. Riley glanced at his partner, uneasy. "Trent, maybe we should check the footage before—" "Before what?" Trent interrupted. "She fits the description, doesn't she? Dark hoodie, backpack, attitude. That's all we need these days." He yanked the zipper of her worn-out backpack open, rummaging inside. Out spilled notebooks, a half-eaten granola bar, and a laminated school ID that skidded across the ground. But something else caught his eye. A small black leather badge case, the kind that looked far too official for a teenager. Trent frowned. "What the hell is this?" Maya tried to speak, but he hauled her down harder. "You stealing this from someone?" he asked, flipping it open. Inside was a gold federal emblem, the unmistakable seal of the Department of Justice, gleaming under the harsh streetlights. The nameplate read, "Dr. Naomi Carter, Deputy Director, Federal Civil Rights Division," and in the photo beside it, a face that looked strikingly like Maya's. The color drained from Trent's face. He blinked, then looked down at the trembling girl under his knee. "Wait a second." Maya finally met his eyes, steady now, no longer pleading. "That's my mother," she said quietly, as Riley helped her up. Riley swallowed hard. "Trent, we need to verify this right now." But before Trent could respond, a black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a stop at the curb. Two men in suits stepped out, their earpieces glinting under the streetlights. One flashed a badge. "Federal Protective Service. We need to know exactly what's going on here." Trent stammered. "Sir, I was just—" The agent interrupted him sharply. "You were just what? Pinning down the daughter of one of the highest-ranking federal civil rights officials in the country?" Phones recorded. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. And somewhere behind them, a woman's voice cracked through the chaos, fierce and cold as steel. "Officer Trent?" Everyone turned. Dr. Naomi Carter herself stepped out of the SUV, her tailored navy suit soaked in the rain, eyes locked on the man who had just shoved her daughter into the pavement. Rain slicked the street now, soft but steady, the kind that made everything glisten. But the air around them was anything but calm. It crackled with anger, disbelief, and fear. Dr. Naomi Carter didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her voice was measured, low, the kind that made seasoned attorneys and congressmen shift in their seats. "Officer Trent," she said again, each word landing like a gavel, "you laid a hand on my daughter." Trent blinked, as though he was still catching up to reality. His jaw twitched. His uniform suddenly felt too tight. "Ma'am, I didn't know. That's the problem. You never know. You didn't ask, you didn't verify, you just assumed." Riley stepped forward, speaking carefully. "Ma'am, we received a report." Naomi's eyes snapped toward him. "And does your department train you to tackle children to the ground based on a report? Or does that only happen when the child looks like her?" The crowd murmured. Someone shouted from across the street, "Tell her, ma'am!" Phones were still filming. Every second was being recorded. The humiliation, the reversal, the truth. Trent tried to gather himself. "Look, this was a misunderstanding." "No," Naomi said, her voice slicing through his excuse. "This was misconduct." Maya stood silently beside her now, clutching her scraped hands together. Her cheek was bruised, her hair damp and tangled. Yet she stood tall, chin lifted, steady. Naomi looked at her daughter for a moment. The same girl who'd spent her afternoons helping kids at the library, who'd once written a school essay titled "Justice Begins at Home." And now she'd been pinned to a sidewalk by the very people sworn to protect her. Naomi's gaze hardened. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Trent hesitated. "Ma'am, I see the badge." "Then you know," she said, stepping closer, "that I wrote the policy your department is supposed to follow when detaining minors. That policy forbids the use of force unless there is immediate threat. Tell me, Officer Trent, did my daughter look like a threat to you?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Riley spoke up again, voice cracking. "Dr. Carter, please, we're sorry. We didn't realize. That's the tragedy of it. Until you realize, it's too late. Until someone's child is on the ground." A hush fell. Even the rain seemed to pause. The two federal agents stepped closer. One of them, Agent Morris, turned to Naomi. "Ma'am, we'll take it from here. Internal Affairs has been notified. We'll escort your daughter home." Naomi nodded slightly, but didn't move yet. She looked straight into the cameras that were still rolling. "This isn't just about my daughter," she said firmly. "This is about every child who's been treated as a suspect before being seen as a student, a daughter, a person. Record that part, too." The bystanders erupted in quiet applause, not loud, but powerful, the kind that comes from shared pain. Trent's radio crackled, but he didn't reach for it. He stood, frozen, drenched, humiliated, realizing the mess he'd made had gone far beyond a single arrest. Maya, still shaking slightly, tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "can we go?" Naomi turned to her daughter and exhaled, the kind of deep breath that comes after you've been holding back for too long. "Yes, baby, we're going." As they turned toward the SUV, Naomi looked back one last time. Her eyes locked on Trent's, not with rage, but with warning. "Officer," she said quietly, "you should pray the cameras caught everything, because the truth will do more to you than I ever could." Then she opened the SUV door, guiding Maya inside. The vehicle pulled away slowly, tires slicing through shallow puddles, leaving behind flashing lights and silence. But silence didn't last long. Within the hour, the videos hit social media. The hashtags started trending. Hashtag Justice for Maya. Hashtag Library Not Looting. Hashtag She Wrote the Law. And by morning, every news outlet in the country had picked up the story. A black teen tackled outside a bookstore, a federal badge, a mother's wrath, and a police department scrambling for damage control. Trent's name was trending too, for all the wrong reasons. By sunrise, the story had already become a wildfire. The video, less than 2 minutes long, had been posted by a woman who worked at the coffee shop across the street. It began with the sound of a girl crying, a uniformed officer shouting, and then the moment that changed everything, when a soaked leather badge hit the asphalt and the crowd gasped. By morning, that clip had crossed 30 million views. Anchors were already talking before breakfast. A shocking scene outside a D.C. bookstore last night. Sources confirmed the teenager tackled by officers is the daughter of Dr. Naomi Carter, the woman who drafted the federal youth protection statute. This is more than a mistake. It's a national embarrassment. Every channel played the same footage on repeat. The shove, the badge, the mother's voice like a blade cutting through the noise. "You laid a hand on my daughter!" People didn't just watch, they felt it. In living rooms across America, especially among older black viewers who had lived this story before, there was a mix of fury and vindication. Calls flooded police hotlines, senators' offices, news stations. The same question kept repeating in every call, every post. If that's what happens to the daughter of the woman who wrote the law, what's happening to everyone else's child? In the precinct, chaos reigned. Officer Trent sat stiff in an interrogation room, his wet uniform drying in patches. His face was pale. Across the table, his supervisor, Captain Reeves, looked 10 years older than he had the night before. "Do you have any idea who she is?" Reeves snapped. Trent swallowed hard. "I didn't. She looked—" "Stop!" Reeves slammed his hand on the table. "Just stop. You didn't look. You didn't think. You assumed. And now the White House is asking questions." He tossed his phone down. On the screen, a tweet from the Department of Justice. "We are aware of the incident involving Dr. Naomi Carter and her daughter. An independent review has been ordered." Trent stared at it like it was a death sentence. Across town, Naomi sat in her living room watching the same coverage. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters, senators, advocacy groups, even an old college professor who texted simply, "Naomi, you just started a revolution again." But Naomi didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. Her daughter sat curled up beside her, silent, knees drawn to her chest. Maya hadn't said much since last night. The bruises were faint now, but the hurt went deeper. It wasn't just about her. It was about what she symbolized. Naomi turned off the TV. "Honey, you okay?" Maya nodded, but her voice was small. "They didn't even ask my name, Mom. Not once." Naomi swallowed hard. "That's why we fight, baby. So the next time, they will." By midday, the public outrage had reached critical mass. The mayor's office held a press conference, an emergency one. Dozens of reporters crowded the marble steps of City Hall. Cameras flashed. A trembling spokesperson stepped up to the podium. "We deeply regret last night's incident," and the crowd wasn't having it. Someone shouted from the back, "Regret doesn't fix bruises." Another yelled, "Fire him!" The spokesperson stammered, "We are reviewing departmental policy." Naomi arrived just then, unannounced, flanked by 2 colleagues from the Federal Oversight Committee. Her presence silenced the crowd instantly. No security escort, no press handler, just quiet authority. She took the microphone from the spokesperson's hand. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried the fire of someone who'd had enough. "I've spent the last decade writing laws to protect our youth from being profiled, targeted, and harmed by those who mistake fear for duty. Last night, I watched my own child become a victim of the system I helped build. So let me be clear, this isn't about one officer, this is about all of them. Every uniform that forgets the badge is meant to serve, not intimidate." Reporters shouted questions, but Naomi held up her hand. "This isn't a soundbite, it's a wake-up call." Meanwhile, across the country, people began marching. Students in Boston held signs that read, "She wrote the law, they broke it." Church groups in Atlanta organized candlelight vigils. Even retired officers, men and women who had served for decades, posted statements calling for reform. One viral post read, "When justice needs permission to breathe, it's already suffocating." But the most powerful moment came that night. Maya, quiet all day, asked her mother if she could go online. Naomi hesitated, but then nodded, so Maya opened her laptop and went live. No script, no press team, just a bruised teenager sitting in her room with trembling hands and unshakable courage. "Hi, my name is Maya Carter. I guess a lot of you already know that by now." She looked down, then back at the camera. "I just wanted to say, I'm not angry. Not anymore. I'm just tired of being afraid." Thousands of people joined the stream within minutes. Comments flooded in. "We love you, Maya. You're brave. We see you." Maya continued, voice steadying. "My mom always says laws can't change hearts. Only people can do that. So if you're watching this, especially if you wear a uniform, I just want you to ask yourself something. When you see a black girl walking home from school, do you see danger or do you see someone's daughter? Because I'm somebody's daughter, and I just want to make it home." The video ended. Within hours, it had reached 20 million views, more than the original arrest footage. And for the first time in years, people weren't just arguing, they were listening. The press conference was supposed to last 15 minutes. It went on for nearly 2 hours. By the time Chief Roland Hayes walked onto the stage, the crowd was restless. Rows of flashing cameras, microphones jutting forward like bayonets. The room smelled of sweat, rain, and tension. He adjusted his collar, cleared his throat, and faced the cameras. Behind him, a blue banner read, "Integrity, Service, Honor." But that morning, none of those words seemed to mean much. "Good afternoon," he began, voice low. "Before we address departmental updates, I want to speak directly to the Carter family." He paused, his jaw tightening. "What happened last night was unacceptable. There's no excuse, not policy, not pressure, not protocol, that justifies what the world saw." The room fell silent. He continued, more slowly now, every word deliberate. "I have personally spoken with Dr. Naomi Carter and her daughter, Maya. I offered my apology, and I offer it again publicly, not as a chief, but as a father." Flashbulbs erupted. A few reporters murmured. They hadn't expected this tone, not from him. Hayes was known for his stoic demeanor, his refusal to bend under public pressure. But now something had cracked. "My daughter's 16, he said quietly. "If I saw her treated that way, I would demand justice too." He turned toward the cameras, directly addressing the millions watching from home. "And to every young person who's ever felt unsafe in the presence of those sworn to protect them, you deserve better. We will do better." Across town, Naomi watched from her office. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from senators, civil rights leaders, even journalists who once dismissed her reforms as idealistic. Now everyone wanted her quote, her reaction, her next move. But Naomi wasn't smiling. Her gaze stayed fixed on the TV, on the image of the man apologizing for a system she had spent her life trying to fix. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to exhale. Maya, sitting beside her, crossed her arms. "Do you think he means it?" Naomi glanced at her daughter, studying her face, the quiet hurt, the cautious hope. "I think," she said softly, "he means it today. What matters is what he does tomorrow." Meanwhile, in a cramped interrogation room, Officer Trent sat staring at the floor. He'd been there for hours. No phone, no badge, no weapon. Just the echo of his own words replaying in his mind. "Don't resist. Show me your hands. You people always have an excuse." Every phrase now sounded heavier, uglier. He rubbed his temples, trying to block it out, but the images wouldn't stop. The terrified look in Maya's eyes, the gasps from the crowd, the moment that badge hit the ground. When the door finally opened, it wasn't his captain who entered. It was Naomi Carter. He froze. She didn't speak right away, just looked at him, expression unreadable. The silence stretched until Trent finally muttered, "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." Naomi's tone was calm, but every word landed like a hammer. "No one ever does, but it still does, over and over again." He swallowed. "I wasn't trying to hurt her." Naomi leaned forward. "You didn't just hurt her, officer. You reminded every black child in this country why their parents still tell them to keep your hands visible. You didn't just tackle a girl. You tackled trust." Trent's eyes dropped. He whispered, "I'm sorry." Naomi looked at him for a long time, then nodded once. "Then prove it," she said, standing to leave. "When this is over, use your voice to change what broke you too." By afternoon, the world knew everything. Naomi's phone rang again. This time it wasn't the media, it was the White House. A calm, measured voice came through. "Dr. Carter, this is Evelyn Morales, Chief Policy Advisor to the President. He watched your video." Naomi froze mid-step. "You mean a federal review?" "Yes," Morales replied. "The President wants to expand the Youth Protection Act. You started this, Dr. Carter. We'd like you to help rewrite it." For the first time since that night, Naomi felt her knees weaken. The fight she had carried for decades, the one that cost her sleep, peace, even friendships, was finally being heard in the highest office of the land. She turned to Maya, tears welling in her eyes. "You see that, baby? They're finally listening." Maya smiled faintly. "Guess they had to see me first." By evening, #WeSeeHer was trending worldwide. Celebrities, activists, retired judges, and even police officers shared her story, not as another outrage, but as a symbol. A movement was being born in real time. And while the media swirled, Naomi and Maya sat quietly on their porch, the sunset painting the sky gold and violet. For the first time in days, the world outside felt still. "Mom," Maya whispered, "do you ever get tired of being strong?" Naomi smiled softly. "Every day. But then I remember, strength isn't what we show the world. It's what keeps us standing when no one's watching." Maya leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. They sat that way for a long while. No cameras, no headlines, no chaos. Just two women, one who wrote the law and one who was living proof it still needed rewriting. By sunrise, the story had escaped their control. Every major network in the country ran the same 27-second clip, grainy phone footage of a police officer slamming a teenage girl in a courthouse hallway. Then the twist. The girl's backpack sliding open, revealing a Parliament ID card. The caption beneath every broadcast read the same. "Cop arrests black teen in court. Turns out she's the daughter of the lawmaker who wrote the bill he broke." By mid-morning, Millions had watched. By noon, it was everyone. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all flooded with disbelief, rage, and heartbreak. Hashtag we see her. Hashtag justice for Maya. Hashtag she wrote the law. 3 hashtags, 1 story. Clips of Naomi's press statement were being remixed with speeches she'd given years ago, the ones people once ignored. Now every line sounded prophetic. When the people sworn to uphold the law begin to fear accountability, they no longer serve justice, they serve themselves. Those words became the quote of the day, printed across newspapers, plastered across protest signs, shouted through bullhorns. Within hours, city streets across the country were filled, not with chaos, but with unity. Students skipped classes, church leaders opened their doors, veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with college kids holding handmade signs. In front of the courthouse where Maya was tackled, hundreds gathered silently, each person holding a candle. No chants, no slogans, just names of every young black person who had faced brutality in the name of procedure. Maya watched from the car window as she and her mother approached the building for a televised statement. Her stomach twisted, not from fear, but from awe. "I didn't know all these people would care," she whispered. Naomi smiled softly. "They don't just care about you, baby. They care about what you represent. Every time a system forgets who it's meant to protect." When they stepped out, applause erupted, spontaneous, deafening, uncontainable. Naomi wasn't used to this kind of attention. Neither was Maya. Reporters shouted questions. "Dr. Carter, do you plan to file charges? Miss Carter, do you forgive the officer? Will you use this moment to push for reforms?" Naomi raised her hand, silencing the chaos. "I don't need revenge. I need reform. And I'm not interested in destroying lives. I'm interested in saving them." The crowd fell silent. Then, as if on cue, hundreds of voices echoed her words. "Not revenge, reform." It spread like wildfire. By evening, "Not revenge, reform" was trending globally. But the moment that sealed the movement didn't come from her mother, it came from Maya herself. That night, she sat in her bedroom, still wearing the same blazer she'd been arrested in. A friend convinced her to record a short video. Just her, sitting on her bed, no makeup, no filter, no script. She looked directly into the camera and spoke quietly. "I wasn't just tackled. I was reminded that no matter how smart you are, how polite you are, how right you are, some people will still see you as a threat. But you can't let that change who you are, because the moment you stop believing you belong, they win." The video was 94 seconds long. Within 24 hours, it hit 60 million views. Grandmothers shared it, teachers played it in classrooms, news anchors quoted it on air. One comment under the video read, "This young woman speaks like she's carrying every ancestor who ever was told to stay silent." As the movement grew, so did the scrutiny. Anonymous threats, endless interviews, politicians begging Naomi to tone down the rhetoric before the upcoming elections. Corporations started sending solidarity statements, carefully worded and legally sanitized. Naomi refused them all. "This isn't branding. This is reckoning," she told her team. Meanwhile, the department faced unprecedented backlash. Dozens of officers resigned, claiming they felt targeted. But others, especially younger ones, reached out privately to Naomi. "You don't know me, but I joined the force because of your work. Please, don't stop now." For the first time, Naomi saw a crack, not just in the wall of the system, but in the hearts of those within it. But fame is a double-edged sword. Maya couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. At the grocery store, people whispered her name. At school, teachers treated her differently, some with reverence, others with resentment. She missed the simplicity of being just another student. One night she told her mom, "I didn't ask to be a symbol." Naomi looked at her tenderly. "Symbols aren't chosen, sweetheart. They're forged in fire." Maya didn't reply, just nodded, tears filling her eyes. Then something extraordinary happened. During a national broadcast, a senator from Georgia, once one of Naomi's most vocal critics, stood before Congress holding up Maya's photo. This young woman reminded this country what accountability looks like. "We teach children to respect the law. Maybe it's time we teach the law to respect them back." Applause filled the chamber. For the first time in years, Naomi Carter's bill, the Youth Protection and Accountability Act, was scheduled for immediate revision. This time, no one could bury it in committee. Not after the entire country had seen what ignoring it led to. Hashtag We See Her evolved from a hashtag into a foundation. Volunteers set up scholarship funds, mentorship programs, legal clinics for young activists, and police training grants led by reform experts, all inspired by Maya's story. TV interviews turned into partnerships, and speeches became summits. Even rival networks united for a single broadcast, The Reckoning, a nation's promise to its daughters. And through it all, Maya stayed grounded. When asked what she wanted people to take away from her story, she said, "Don't make me a hero. Make sure I'm the last one who has to go through this." Her words became the mission statement of an entire movement. Sergeant Daniel Reeves hadn't slept in 3 nights, not since the video. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, that look of disbelief and pain when she hit the ground. He had replayed the moment 1,000 times. It always ended the same way. His hands gripping her arm, her backpack slipping, that flash of blue and gold, the Parliament ID. He used to think he was a good cop. Now he wasn't so sure. In the department locker room, the mood was toxic. A few officers muttered that Reeves was being thrown under the bus. Others called the media reaction an overblown circus. But when the chief entered, silence fell. He didn't scold Reeves. He didn't even look at him. He just placed a file on the bench and said, "Internal Affairs wants your statement by noon. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to anyone." Then he left. For the first time in his career, Reeves noticed the fear behind the chief's eyes. Not fear for him, but for the department's crumbling reputation. At home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. His teenage daughter, Ellie, hadn't spoken to him since the story broke. His wife avoided the news entirely, walking around the house with earbuds in, pretending not to hear the protests outside. The neighborhood that once waved when he drove by now glared through blinds. Even the corner store clerk, who used to give him free coffee, looked away when Reeves walked in. He'd always told himself he was one of the good ones, the kind who didn't see color, the kind who just followed procedure. But deep down, he knew the truth. He hadn't slammed that girl because she was a threat. He'd slammed her because, for a split second, he didn't see her. He saw defiance. He saw challenge. He saw every stereotype drilled into him since academy days, and he reacted before thinking. When he opened the IA file that night, his hands trembled. Photos, transcripts, complaints, not just from Maya's case, but others he'd handled. Small things he'd brushed off. Excessive tone, unnecessary force, dismissive toward youth. Each one looked different now, part of a pattern he had refused to see. Then he found the letter that gutted him. It was written by a mother whose teenage son Reeves had detained 6 months earlier. The last line read, You looked at my boy like he didn't belong in your world. He was just trying to get home. That was it. No anger, no accusation, just a plea from someone who wanted her child treated like a person. Reeves closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. The sound of his own breathing filled the room. 2 days later, Reeves was summoned to a disciplinary hearing. He walked through the marble hallway lined with journalists, shouting questions, flashbulbs exploding like gunfire. Inside, the committee members sat behind a long table, cold, detached, rehearsed. They spoke about protocol violations and department liability, never once mentioning the word that haunted him most, humanity. When asked to explain himself, Reeves hesitated. His attorney nudged him, whispering, "Stick to the script." But something inside him snapped. "I can't do that," Reeves said quietly. "I need to tell the truth." He looked up, meeting every set of eyes in the room. "I was wrong. Not just for that day, for all the days before it. I saw that young woman as a problem, not a person. And the worst part is, I didn't even question why." The room went still. No one moved. No one breathed. Reeves continued, his voice trembling but firm. "We wear badges that say to protect and serve. But what do we protect when fear decides who we see as human? What do we serve when our pride becomes more important than justice?" One of the committee members whispered, "Sergeant, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time, because for too long I told myself silence was professionalism. It wasn't. It was cowardice." He stood up, removed his badge, and placed it gently on the table. "I can't fix what I did that day, but I can start by facing it." The statement leaked within hours. By nightfall, clips of Reeves' confession circulated online, paired with the footage of the incident. Some called it redemption, others called it performative guilt. But for once, the conversation shifted from outrage to accountability. Naomi Carter watched the video in her living room, her daughter beside her. When Reeves said, "I saw that young woman as a problem, not a person," Naomi's eyes welled up. She whispered, "That's the first time I've ever heard an officer say it out loud." Maya looked at her mom, conflicted. "He sounds sorry." Naomi nodded slowly. "He is, but being sorry isn't the same as being changed. We'll see which one he becomes." A week later, an envelope arrived at the Carter residence. No return address. Inside, a handwritten letter. "Dear Miss Carter, you don't owe me forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I've resigned from the force and started volunteering with a community outreach program for at-risk youth. I'm not asking for redemption, just accountability. Your daughter reminded me that laws don't just exist on paper. They live in how we treat each other. I failed that lesson once. I don't intend to fail it again. Daniel Reeves." Naomi folded the letter carefully. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just whispered, "Good." Because change wasn't about words. It was about what came next. Weeks later, during a televised town hall on police reform, Naomi was invited as a panelist. Halfway through, the moderator announced a surprise guest. Sergeant Daniel Reeves walked onto the stage. Gasps rippled through the audience. Maya's eyes widened. She didn't expect this. Reeves approached the microphone, hands visibly shaking. "I came here because it's easy to apologize in private, but real accountability happens when you face the people you've hurt, publicly." He turned toward Naomi and Maya. "You changed me, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure fewer people like me ever make that same mistake." The audience erupted in applause, not because the pain had vanished, but because the courage to confront it had finally arrived. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, the city felt different, softer somehow, like everyone was still learning how to breathe again after a long winter of anger, grief, and uncomfortable truth. The protests had stopped echoing down Main Street, but the signs still leaned against building walls, faded by rain. They weren't forgotten, just resting. And in a small community center on the east side, Maya Carter was setting up folding chairs for a youth program that didn't exist 6 months ago. The project was called See Me First. It started as a hashtag Naomi posted after the hearing, but it turned into a movement faster than anyone expected. The idea was simple. Before reacting, before judging, before assuming, see the person first. Schools, police precincts, and even local businesses started adopting the mantra. And on this particular afternoon, Maya was leading her first session with teenagers from her old neighborhood, the same kids who had grown up learning to flinch when sirens passed. She stood at the front of the room, her Parliament ID now laminated and pinned proudly to her jacket. You know, when I was your age, I thought power meant shouting the loudest. But the truth? Power is staying calm when someone tries to make you small. A quiet murmur spread through the room. One boy raised his hand. "What if they don't listen?" he asked softly. Maya smiled, the kind of smile that held both sadness and strength. "Then you make them listen, not by shouting louder, but by standing taller." The crowd of teens leaned forward, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Outside, Naomi was talking with a familiar figure, Daniel Reeves. He arrived early that morning, in plain clothes this time. No badge, no uniform, just a man still learning how to walk through the world without hiding behind authority. He had volunteered to help coordinate the mentorship part of See Me First, pairing officers with local teens in supervised conversations, not to debate, but to listen. Naomi had agreed, cautiously. And though some people called her too forgiving, she wasn't forgiving him for his sake. She was doing it for her daughter, and for every kid who'd ever been told they were too loud, too angry, or too much. Now, as she looked at Reeves setting up art supplies on the table, she said quietly, "You really came back, huh?" He nodded. "I said I would." She studied him for a moment. "You know, part of me still wants to hate you." Reeves met her eyes. "I don't blame you." Naomi sighed. "But the other part of me, the mother part, it's tired of hating. I just want better." He smiled faintly. "So do I." After the session, Maya came outside, laughing with the kids. Reeves watched from a distance, a quiet pride flickering in his expression. He turned to Naomi and said, "You raised a leader." Naomi folded her arms, pretending to hide a smile. "No, the world tried to break her, and she decided to lead anyway." The three of them stood there for a long time, not as enemies, not even as symbols, just as people bound by something bigger than themselves. Behind them, a mural stretched across the brick wall of the community center. It showed a young black woman holding a torch, her reflection in the paint transforming into a uniformed officer reaching out his hand. Above it, in gold letters, were the words, "Justice begins when someone decides to see." Maya had painted it herself. The See Me First initiative spread faster than anyone expected. Police departments in 5 states adopted its training framework. Community groups started holding story circles, gatherings where civilians and officers shared personal experiences without interruption. And for the first time in years, the national conversation began to shift. Not toward blind forgiveness, but toward shared accountability. Maya found herself invited to Washington for a youth summit on criminal justice reform. When she walked into the Capitol building, she paused for a moment, remembering the courtroom floor, the officer's hand, the sound of laughter before the fall. Now she walked taller. Every step was a reminder that she didn't just survive that day, she rewrote it. During her speech, she looked directly into the camera. Justice isn't just what happens in courtrooms. It's what happens in classrooms, living rooms, and hearts that decide to change. If one person can hurt another with power, then one person can heal with it too. Her words echoed across the chamber, carried by news outlets across the country. A few days later, a package arrived at Maya's apartment. Inside was a small silver box and a handwritten note. For Maya, I thought I knew what justice looked like. Then you showed me what it feels like. Dr. Inside the box was a badge, Reeves's old police badge, with one difference. Someone had engraved new words on the back: to protect and see. Maya held it for a long moment. Then she placed it on her desk next to her Parliament ID. Two symbols, once divided, now side by side. Later that evening, Maya sat with her mother on the porch, watching the sunset stain the sky pink and orange. Naomi asked quietly, "Do you forgive him?" Maya thought for a long time before answering. "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but I'm not carrying it anymore." Naomi nodded. "That's enough." They sat in silence as cicadas sang in the distance, the soft hum of peace replacing the roar of injustice that once filled their lives. Months passed. The movement grew. And one summer morning, a young officer walked into his first day of academy training. On the whiteboard were 4 words written in bold black letters: "See the person first." The instructor turned and said, "This program was built by a woman named Maya Carter. Remember that name." The story didn't end with applause or fame. It ended the way real change often does, quietly, persistently, through people who decided to do better. Maya Carter became more than a symbol. She became a teacher, a bridge, a reminder. Because justice, as she once said, isn't about punishment, it's about recognition. Recognition that power means nothing without empathy. That apology means nothing without action. And that sometimes the people the world tries hardest to silence are very ones who end up rewriting its laws. The screen fades from the sunset outside Maya's home to a close-up of her face, calm, proud, but forever changed. Her eyes look directly into the camera. This isn't just a story anymore. It's a mirror. "If you've watched this far," Maya begins softly, "then maybe you felt it too. That moment when someone decided who you were before you even spoke." A pause. You can feel the weight of her words, the kind of silence that makes people lean in closer. Maybe it happened in a courtroom. Maybe it happened in a classroom. Or maybe it happened in the quiet corner of your own life when someone looked at you and saw everything except the truth. Her tone shifts slightly, not angry, but unwavering. "But here's the thing I learned that day on that cold courtroom floor. Dignity can't be handcuffed. And truth? Truth always stands back up." The screen flashes with quick images, real footage of protests, youth mentoring circles, officers listening in workshops, kids holding "See Me First" signs. They laughed when I spoke. They rolled their eyes when I reached for my ID. They thought power meant having the badge, but real power Maya says, leaning closer, is when you refuse to become what the world expects you to be. A slow, haunting piano begins under her voice. I didn't need revenge. I needed recognition. Recognition that my life, my voice, my story mattered. She pauses again, letting it sink in. Then the screen widens. We see Maya standing in front of the murals she painted, the woman holding a torch, reaching toward the officer's hand. Sunlight spills across it like fire. So here's what I want you to do tomorrow, she says directly to the viewer. When you see someone being dismissed, step in. When you hear someone being judged, speak up. When you meet someone who looks, talks, or walks differently, see them first. Her tone shifts slightly, not angry, but unwavering. But we're saying the system needs to change. But systems are made of people. You are the system. And if you decide to see differently, everything changes. Cut to footage of Naomi leading a community meeting. Then Reeves, now training new recruits, reading the phrase, "to protect and see," engraved on his badge. And back to Maya, her eyes glimmering with conviction. Maybe you're a teacher who stopped believing your students care. Maybe you're an officer who stopped believing people can change. Maybe you're just tired of hearing bad news and feeling helpless. But remember this. Change didn't start in a courtroom that day. It started in a moment when a black woman refused to be invisible. A beat of silence. So if this story moved you, share it. Share it for every person who's been told they're too young, too black, too loud, too different. Comment with one time you decided to see someone for who they truly were. And if you believe the world still needs more eyes that see, more hearts that listen, more voices that rise, then don't just scroll past this. Her voice breaks slightly, sincere, trembling just enough to feel real. Because one day, someone's going to need you to step forward. And when that moment comes, I hope you remember this story. I hope you remember me. The music swells. She looks straight into the lens one final time. They called me a criminal. They called me a problem. But now they call me ma'am. And maybe that's enough. The screen fades to black. Then, in white text, "See me first, because justice begins with sight."